Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Sunday service with the Atheist Reformation. Again, joining me is going to be my co-host Harry. How you doing, Harry?
I'm doing all right. I just forgot that I just remembered that I remembered that I forgot my Bible.
Okay. I'm sure there's a Mudvayne reference necessary in there somewhere.
Not that I can think of, because I hadn't listened to a lot of Mudvayne. But yeah,
One of their most successful singles for Forget to Remember. But yeah, no. So today we're talking about a few different things. Bringing up our PSA from last show. Remember, homeopathy is bullshit. Can't forget that one.
Which we had a very sad story over the week of someone who tried to use homeopathy and essential oils, and they put it in a diffuser and ended up murdering their dog. Because essential oils are not meant to be inhaled. It will kill you.
Yeah. Well, essential oils are also not meant to be injected, and neither is hydrogen peroxide. But there are people that do it. Like, there's clinics in this state that administer what's considered pharmaceutical grade intravenous hydrogen peroxide.
That sounds terrifying.
It is. It's caused at least one death that I know of for sure.
You said it causes death.
It can eventually. I mean, hydrogen peroxide, what it does is it bursts cells. That's what it does on a chemical level.
Yeah.
It's bad, okay?
Just imagine like it fizzing up your bloodstream. Jeez.
I mean, you wouldn't be far off the mark. I mean, you really wouldn't.
We got any?
So what have you been up to today?
This morning I went canvassing for a political candidate, and this is actually the last weekend to register to vote. If you are not registered to vote in the state of Texas, this is the last weekend to register if you want to vote in the primary in March. So to all our viewers out there that are Republican, this is a good chance to decide who you want to represent your party for different offices. For all our friends out there that are Democrats, this is a good chance for you to decide which of the 100 people running you want to throw your vote toward. And for all our friends that are independent, well, honestly, it's going to make no difference to you anyway.
You're not way to bring down the vibe for the naders of the world.
I mean, y'all have your own thing that you do. You do your own like libertarians and independents do your own thing. Like a week afterward, y'all don't really vote in the primary. So
true, they don't. Yeah. All right, so let's see. Which article would you like to do first? We've got 3 that we're going to do today, as per usual. We want to do the one that you sent me, the article about Stephen Hawking.
I mean, it's up to you. We could do that one, or since we're talking about politics, if we want to jump into a super political one first, we could. Because that's not really the focus of this show, so
true.
A sandwich of things.
All right, yeah, we'll go ahead and we'll do the uber political thing real quick. So this segment is the First Amendment under attack in Virginia? Now, of course, all articles are going to be linked in the video description below. So let's take a look at what we're working with today. Let's see here.
I also looked up the actual law that was being written.
I've got that queued up too.
Perfect.
Yeah, no, I don't do things halfway. What's that?
We're talking about the one from 2020.
Yes, talking about the one from 2020. Alrighty. Oh, that looks completely and utterly terrible. So let's fix that.
You got your overlay.
Yep. No more overlay. So, this article comes from nationalfile.com. There are tons of them out there, just kind of all over the place. I'm just using this one because it's one that someone sent to me through Facebook, I think. So they're saying Virginia Dems introduce anti-free speech legislation to make criticizing them illegal. We're going to find out that that's actually not the case.
Maybe.
No, like it's not. Like having read through the actual proposed legislation that was voted and passed, it's not. It really isn't. But let's go into the article real quick. They say after the Senate approved a series of gun control measures, the Democrat-led Virginia State House is now pushing legislation that will make it a Class 1 misdemeanor to criticize the government, with the ability for Richmond authorities to charge any citizen of the state with the crime. Someone doesn't know how to read legislation.
Yeah, that's not 100% accurate with the.
That is 0% accurate.
Well, we can get to that later.
The bill, titled HB House Bill 1627, threatens and harassment of certain officials and property venue, would make it a crime for citizens to offer harassment by computer and allow Richmond police to pursue such crimes anywhere in the state. It appears that if passed, Virginians who voice their dislike or distrust of the Virginia government via Facebook or Twitter, including the infamous Virginia Governor Ralph Northam, who was exposed by National File, blah, 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 of being photographed wearing either blackface or KKK robes in 2019, may be visited by Richmond police.
Story?
What's that?
Because that's completely related to this story.
Yeah, it's not. But whatever. So according to the text of the bill, if any person with the intent to coerce, intimidate, or harass any person shall use a computer or computer network to communicate obscene, vulgar, profane, lewd, lascivious, or indecent language, or make any suggestion or proposal of an obscene nature, or threaten any illegal or immoral act, he is guilty of a Class 1 misdemeanor. A violation of this section may be prosecuted in the jurisdiction in which the communication was made or received, or in the city of Richmond, if the person subjected to the act is one of the following officials or employees of the Commonwealth: the governor, governor-elect, lieutenant governor-elect, attorney general or attorney general-elect, a member or employee of the General Assembly, a justice of the Supreme Court of Virginia, or a judge of the Court of Appeals of Virginia. So, seems pretty cut and dry, doesn't it? It sounds abjectly terrifying and terrible. Well, let's look at the bill itself. The legislation itself, if you will. So, this is it from virginia.gov. This is their legislative information system. Now, when you look at the bill itself, it is to amend and reenact these sections. The amendments are listed through here either as additions, that is this text in italics, or replacements made obvious by strike-throughs followed by italics of the replacing language. That's anything in here that is not italicized, struck through, was already part of it. And I'll prove it to you. This section right here, harassment by computer, penalty, okay? This is what they're talking about. If we click on this, it follows us to a link to the Code of Virginia. Look when this was written. In 2000, this has been a law on the books in the state of Virginia with this exact language for 20 years. The only thing that happened was this language was added. What we saw in the article. That's it.
And what language is that? How does that alter the original law?
Here's the thing. It doesn't. Not really. It doesn't alter the punishment. It doesn't alter the crime. All it does is offer alternate venues for prosecution. It doesn't give any additional power to any of the listed offices or officials in here. All it does is it basically codifies prosecutorial discretion when it comes to venue changes.
So let's read the italicized part so we know exactly what we're referring to.
A violation of this section may be prosecuted in the jurisdiction in which the communication was made or received, or in the city of Richmond, if the person subjected to the act is one of the following officials or employees of the Commonwealth. And then it lists those elected offices. In fact, let me zoom in so people can see.
So what's the original wording without that part that was added?
Everything prior to this that's not italicized. In fact, I'll even go to it. It's this right here. If any person with the intent to coerce, intimidate, or harass any person shall use a computer or computer network to communicate obscene, vulgar, profane, lewd, lascivious, or indecent language, or make any suggestion or proposal of an obscene nature, or threaten any illegal or immoral act, he shall be guilty of a Class 1 misdemeanor.
Yeah, I think
that's it.
So,
and that's been on the books for 20 years.
Yeah, but there's a difference.
No, there isn't. The only thing that changed is he shall be is he is guilty, which is what shall be is read as from legalistic English anyways. So they made it plainer. And number two, they made it where this section falls in line with the rest of this criminal code anyways. Because when you look up through here, 18.2 through 60, and you check out sections A, 1 and 2, B, and then finally, a prosecution pursuant to this section may be either in the county, city, or town in which the communication was made or received. Full stop. Then it added the same language we see from this point on.
There's one thing that we're forgetting, though.
What's that?
Is that the new edition makes this applicable to public figures.
It was already applicable to public figures.
No, it wasn't.
How was it not?
Governor or his staff or any of those people. Private citizens can be protected from
threatening the governor or his immediate family, 18.2-60.1.
For death threats.
Okay. Actually, no. Harassment is any person. To harass any person.
Well, then if it's for any person, what's the purpose of including the governor? It's because person is not considered the same when we're talking about freedom of speech as a public figure. You are free to use vulgar language and obscene language to complain about or to critique a public figure.
Right, but this is specifically talking about harassment. Harassment has a very particular definition in criminal code. Like, for instance, let's go ahead and I'm just going to Google in a different tab, what does harassment mean in Virginia?
I mean, is harassment spamming his Facebook wall?
That's solicitous street harassment.
You know what this reminds me of, though? That South Park thing where it's like, words are like bullets.
Yeah, but they're not.
Virginia bans them both.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's accurate, that's funny.
Oh no, it is funny. Don't get me wrong. It's funny.
As you demonstrated by your lack of laughter.
That's because I'm in the middle of looking things up.
But yeah, that would be my only thing. I think that it is kind of blown out of proportion because a lot of people are thinking about this as a brand new law when it is, for the most part, an amendment to a previous bill. So it's not really saying that these collective actions are new actions that are being blocked.
They're not. These aren't new actions. This is something that's been on the books for 20 years.
I especially dislike how this article decided to throw, like, we already don't like the governor of Virginia.
No, Ralph Northam is a turd.
Like, we don't like him, but his past sins have nothing to do with this particular news story. Like, that's just extraneous information. I mean, yes, he blasted for that because it was stupid and terrible and awful. And I don't know how he got elected, except for that people just were ignorant and didn't know at the time. But that has nothing to do with this. Why bring it into this article?
Because they could, I suppose. I mean,
kind of the journalism you should not be paying attention to. Like, you should not use.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Because this person, one of your friends or one of our listeners or whatever, sent this story to you. But this is a sign. This is probably not the most credible news source.
No, it's probably not. But there again, this, aside from the Northam reference, this is in large part representative of most, I hate to say it, conservative media outlets.
I'll give you that because most of the articles that I've read
have all stated things to that effect, almost verbatim.
Of the law, they did not mention what was actually new and what was changed.
Yeah.
Now, I did one or two that were very specific. I can't remember if it was Daily Wire or who it was, but it was someone who was just like very specific when they tore it down and said, this is basically making, like, you could interpret how it was worded to basically say that any complaint about the governor or his staff would be considered a form of harassment.
Except that that's not what that entails. Like, it's in a completely, when you look down here, it's in a completely separate statement from the description of the offense.
I mean,
this is only talking about prosecutorial venue. That's it. That's all this is talking about. That period right there in the law is a hard stop. It is a complete separation of these two. But because Virginia uses a legislative style of lawmaking, or not legislative, what the hell is it? Hell, I can never remember the name of it, but it's how the Texas Constitution works, is that basically their ratification process is everything has to be proposed as an amendment, everything has to be voted on statewide. Like when Gregg County wanted to rename, they wanted to rename something, and it had to be approved as a constitutional amendment in the state of Texas. This was back several years ago. Virginia, the Virginia Constitution and their criminal code, everything is a lot like Texas in that regard. I mean, so if something is not explicitly worded, then it tends to be, then if it's allowed, it tends to be allowed by legal tradition and not necessarily by law.
See, to me, that
like
part read as
prosecutorial discretion.
Go ahead.
It's like prosecutorial discretion. In some states, prosecutorial discretion is enumerated, meaning it's in the state constitution, the state criminal code, or the codes of criminal procedure. It's enumerated within them what the prosecutor has discretion over and what they can do in that regard. Other states, it's not. And it's simply allowed by legal tradition because it's how they've always done it. That doesn't necessarily mean that it is quote unquote lawful. It's not illegal. It's just not codified within the law.
Right.
It's a what's the term? It's a legal practice not in legislation, I believe, is the appropriate terminology for it.
So I guess this is where we differ, because I'm reading that sentence as a modifier to include specific individuals under the definition of person for the definition of harassment by computer, and you're reading it as an explanation of venue.
Right, because they did this throughout the entirety of the code for this section. Like, for instance, you go up here and look for communicates a threat in writing, including an electronically transmitted communication or visual. This section here, this section here, this talking about death threats, threats of bodily injury, and things of that nature. And any person who knowingly communicates in writing, blah, 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 all the way through this, apprehension of death or bodily injury to himself or his family member, all that language is inserted here after made or received to or in the city of Richmond if the person threatened is one of the following officials or employees of the Commonwealth, and then lists all those offices again. And note, it's not just talking about these specific postings. It's one of the following officials or employees of the Commonwealth. So it's just what it's doing is it's establishing venue. That's what this is.
So why would it have been originally listed there for the other two for death threats, which I can get behind that. I get that. No one needs to use death threats as a way of manipulating or bullying someone. But
politically,
why would it not have been listed under, saying vulgar things about someone?
Because this entire piece of criminal code is governing harassment and threats. And so this is just their harassment code. And then it says venue for offenses under this article. Again, any person violating any of the provisions of this article may be prosecuted either in the county or city from which he called, or in the county or city in which the call was received, and then or in the city of Richmond, blah, 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 blah. It basically allows it to, if you threaten a state official or state employee, there is the option of prosecution in the capital.
Okay. Well,
and this is basically just affording the rights of prosecution to be made at any possible venue. Like, for instance, it says in there, in every other portion of here, from which the county or city from which called, or in the county or city in which the call was received.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's just expanding it to mean if a state office received the call, they not only have the option to either request prosecution from the originating county or city, the receiving city or county, or in the state capital as they were a state employee. It is just it's just the establishment of a third option of venue. That's all that is. That doesn't change personhood. That doesn't establish additional personhood. All that does is establish additional venues for prosecution. And that's it.
Okay. So I guess at this point where I'm at is you're making the mistake of trying to interpret this in plain English versus in legal English, which is how it's written. when that's what I was going to say, is that a lot of this would also have to do with knowledge of Virginia law, not just other states' law. And I'm going to trust that you have more research and knowledge on how Virginian law is written, because I think all of that is kind of, narrowing down on that is ultimately missing the interesting point. I think it's the factual point that you first brought up, is that people are reading this as a literal thing with zero knowledge of what's actually been changed and how it should actually be understood. And I think that's a good point.
And they're trying to make the assumption, and they're blowing this way out of proportion. I mean, do I agree wholeheartedly, like whole cloth, with the wording of the law as it sits? No, I don't. I don't have an issue with the amendments that they've made. Any issues that I currently have are with how it's worded right now, and has been worded since the year 2000, when this section was put into play, harassment by computer. And this is specifically talking about harassment by computer penalty. They go on to define harassment in this information here, but they also define harassment as these threats. Knowingly communicates in writing or electronically transmitted communication, communicates a threat in writing. So it's separating these two ideas, but also lumping them together. Like, and they're talking about it being a class 1 misdemeanor. Well, okay, it already is a class 1 misdemeanor in Virginia to harass someone online. And so harassment, as defined in law, is continuous unwanted contact. And I mean, a person could stand at the State House and could still, with proper permits or whatever, stand at the State House with a megaphone and scream at the top of their lungs that Governor Northam is an asshole. But that's not harassment at that point, I don't think, unless it's not in conjunction with, say, a legitimate political gripe. I mean, just sitting there saying that, just sitting there, like, for instance, if I disagree with Governor Abbott over something,
yeah,
there's a difference between me saying Governor Greg Abbott is an asshole and Governor Greg Abbott is an asshole because of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
One is legitimate protected free speech. The other could be termed as harassment if it is protracted, unwanted, and continuous.
You've just defined, like by doing that, you have encompassed about half of the political jokes that have taken place in the last 3 years. Protracted, repetitive, continuous, and has nothing to do with actual policy or position.
But because they are labeled as jokes and they are told with the express intent of comedic value and not with the express intent of harm, it becomes protected speech. A lot of people forget just how nuanced the First Amendment actually is and how we look at things within it.
I have a hard time seeing speech as intended to be harmful if it doesn't advocate violence or threaten.
Well, and that's incitement. And so that's already illegal, but it's not protected. And it's also listed in here as threats of harm.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, they even, and here's why I say that it's purely to do with changes in venue or allowing additional venues of prosecution. A big piece of information that I think really drives that home is right here. 18.2-83. Threats to bomb or damage buildings or means of transportation. false information as to danger to such buildings, etc., punishment, venue. Okay? And it talks about threats to bomb, burn, destroy, or in any manner damage any place of assembly, building, or other structure, or any means of transportation, communicates that, yada, yada, yada. And at that point, they're guilty of a Class 5 felony, unless they're under 15, in which case it's a Class 1 misdemeanor.
Right.
A violation of this section may be prosecuted either in the jurisdiction from which the communication was made, or in the jurisdiction where the communication was received, or in the city of Richmond if the property threatened is owned by the Commonwealth and located within the Capital District. That right there is what, to me, clearly communicates that this is just to do with venue.
Although I do have a question. If someone was against Civil War statues that were owned by the Commonwealth of Virginia, could they be arrested for advocating having those statues torn down?
No, because it doesn't fall under a threat to bomb or damage.
It would be damage.
It's not a threat. They're not threatening to damage it, though. They say they want them torn down. That's protected speech.
Well, there are people that have openly said that they are going to damage it, and then they go out and do it.
Okay, then they've committed a Class 5 felony under Virginia law.
All right.
I mean, that's pretty straightforward to me. If they are caught, arrested, charged, and found guilty, congratulations, they committed a felony. Granted, a Class 5 felony in Virginia is a pittance. I mean, it's still a felony charge, sure, but it's one of the lowest felonies you can get. It's one step above the bottom, which is a Class 6. That's like it's a state jail felony in Texas. That's how we classify it in Texas, a state jail felony. In that, like, it encompasses up to a $2,500 fine and up to, but not over, 2 years of imprisonment in a state jail facility.
I guess my only opinion on all this, when it comes down to it, if I didn't like you and I started a Facebook group and I got 1,000 people to write you a letter, and in that letter it said, "You're a stupid poopy pants." I think that that's a very, possibly psychotic, but different level than if I were to find a particular celebrity that I don't like and have 1,000 people send them a letter saying you're a stupid poopy pants. That's basically, to me, that would be nothing. You're a public figure. You'd expect 1,000 people to send you a stupid letter. But for you to have 1,000 letters come in your mailbox every day saying that would be pretty rough. I mean, you probably wouldn't complain.
I guess for me personally, I would laugh and I would probably make a mural of all the letters.
But something along those lines that's similar to that. I don't know. Let's say that you kicked a dog or something, and you knew it was an accident. Or that's probably a bad example because the internet's going to be like, "Never kick a dog." But I'm trying to think of something.
I'm sorry.
similar.
No, if a dog, I love dogs. I'm a dog person, far more so than I'm a cat person, and I own a cat. Yes, I'm aware of the irony and the apparent hypocrisy of that statement, but that's beside the point. A dog runs up and they're snarling, or they make a move to bite, say, one of my children, I'm kicking the dog in the face.
Okay, and then if I saw that and I was like, "Oh, I can't believe that." Let's say you were telling that story to a friend, and then I got 1,000 people to be like, "You are a horrible human being that deserves to lose your job because you caused pain to one of the creatures on Earth."
Mm-hmm.
And I had 1,000 people send you that letter. Over time, that's not really okay. I think that's definitely harassment.
No, that's harassment, yes. And if you were doing that to a celebrity, I would still agree that that is harassment. If you were doing that to a state official, I would still agree that that is harassment. Yes, you come to expect certain things doing a certain job or being in a certain status. That doesn't make you any less of a person. That does not alter your personhood under the eyes of the law, as something like this would describe. It says clearly any person. So at that point, it doesn't matter if you're the governor, Kim Kardashian, or my fat ass sitting in Lufkin on a podcast.
You just gave your location away.
I don't care.
Now they're going to talk about you kicking dogs.
Dude, I'm already a public figure in Angelina County for the local election stuff that I do. Those are public. Those are worldwide public on Facebook. I mean, so if someone wanted to track me down, I didn't exactly make it difficult. Did I post my address? No. I'm not stupid. Lufkin has 80,000 people in it. So I mean, like,
cruelty, is this horse dead?
Say what?
So speaking of animal cruelty, is this horse dead?
You know what? I'd say this one it's going to be a dead horse, hopefully by the end of this week, but people are still going to be beating it long after it's gone to the glue factory.
Yeah.
So I'd say at this point, I think I've made the point as painfully and obviously clear that no, the First Amendment is not under attack in Virginia. These are just updates to more modern language to make it plainer to understand, and also just codifying possible venues for prosecution for these offenses. And I honestly think that this is something that they've probably needed to do or have needed to have done since probably as early as 1993, because that's when they put legislation into effect for appealing changes of venue to things like, aside from things from improper venue to also preferred venue. And so instead of going and rewording that, they decided to update everything else. I honestly think that that's what's caused all this crap.
Just bad timing.
It really is. It's terrible timing. But I do believe that this it is bad timing. It's been offered as of January 16th, 2020. And the venue options that are being listed, I think, are just to drive the point home. Yes, these are still people. Yes, this is still a crime. And because of this, you can be tried in a multitude of locations. But still, this would still all fall under prosecutorial discretion.
Yeah.
I mean, so the victim doesn't choose the venue. Law enforcement and the criminal courts do. And if you'll look closely, to kind of drive this point home one more time, these offices listed here have no power to do this, to force something into Richmond, not legally speaking anyways.
Yeah.
Because, okay, the closest you could get would be the Attorney General. But it's still an offense that starts at the local level. So it's up to the district attorney. It's up to the district attorney of that district to make that call initially. Because the state attorney general is there primarily to represent the state in civil court, not criminal.
Yeah.
Not to mention, okay, well, it says the Supreme Court of Virginia or the Court of Appeals of Virginia. Yes, those are courts of final jurisdiction and last resort, meaning it must have gone through the entire appellate process and trial process of the lower courts before touching those two courts. So, again, none of those offices listed has the judicial power to force something to Richmond for prosecution. And if they did, okay, congratulations. That's possibly an illegal act of coercion, abuse of office, abuse of power, or obstruction of justice. Pick your poison on that one. Which is why I say, no, this is not an attack on free speech in Virginia. But anyways, I think this one is completely dead now. Let's move on to the next one.
Yeah.
So, we got two options. The article you presented to me, or a wild card that I found about 5 minutes before we started the stream.
Let's go with the article I presented to you.
All right. This one is about Stephen Hawking, people.
Because your wild cards are usually like super wild, and I don't think we're going to have any intelligent conversations after.
I think we will. This one's actually from a neuroscience journal.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, while some of them are wild, yeah, I will agree. Number one, that's part of what keeps the show interesting from time to time. And, what's that?
Soy sauce.
Yeah.
Homeopathic soy sauce.
Don't butt chug it. Just don't do it. All right, so this is from Quartz. Says, please allow Stephen Hawking to explain time, history, and God. So this was what?
Hawking as a religious figure.
Which doesn't make much sense because he's an atheist. He was an atheist. He died an atheist.
This article really makes him out to be a Gnostic, though.
Okay. Anyway. As a kid, the late theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking was not a great student by his own admission. What he was always good at, however, was asking big questions, queries so daunting and seemingly impossible to answer that many of us avoid considering them. In a slender new book, Brief Answers to the Big Questions, released last month, Hawking shared his final thoughts, both scientific and personal. He died in March at 76 years old. That kind of dates this article. Came out in 2018. But not before making the abstract propositions of cosmology and theoretical physics, if not simple, at least accessible and comprehensible. Shed light on his own life, humorously illuminating his path from middling student to world-renowned scientific genius, made more impressive by the fact that Hawking was diagnosed with a degenerative motor neuron disease, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, in his late 20s, ALS, for anyone who doesn't want to try to pronounce that. He wasn't expected to live long. He says, after my expectations had been reduced to zero, every new day became a bonus, and I began to appreciate everything that I did have. He explained, where there's life, there is hope. Okay? All right.
I like that quote.
Yeah, that's a good quote. Scientific laws and God. Hawking was not a religious man. He did not believe in God. He believed in scientific laws. Yet he provided a scientific definition of God and argued that we can know this deity's mind because knowing the mind of God is knowing the laws of nature. My prediction is that we will know the mind of God by the end of this century, he wrote. The dictates of nature might be a definition of God, Hawking conceded, but he did not see these as proof of a deity's existence, merely a description of an impersonal almighty, one who doesn't actually decide how things go in our personal lives or judge us. I don't have a grudge against God, he explained. I don't want to give the impression that my work is about proving or disproving the existence of God. My work is about finding a rational framework to understand the universe around us. Okay? That's one thing that people really kind of tend to completely eliminate when they quote mine Hawking on God.
Yeah.
Because when you see people like Frank Turk and a couple other apologists, they only ever pull up this right here. Or they just say that he hates God and completely ignore this entirely.
Yeah.
It's just really a dice roll on which version of the apologist you're going to get with that one.
I mean, I think that this is where we can probably find some kind of middling ground where if you accept that there's something beyond your comprehension that governs the laws of nature and you're willing to keep an open mind about it, I think that that belief in and of itself would stop a lot of people from starting ignorant arguments that don't have a positive outcome with theists. Because
I would
anything positive come from that.
I would say to some degree, maybe. But in large part, no. If anything, stuff like that tends to lean itself towards, unfortunately, what I've seen a lot of theists do, which is reviving a God of the gaps argument. Science can't explain this, therefore God.
I think that in some ways, and this is completely sidestepping your comment because it kind of relates but doesn't really. So I guess
Okay.
it's just like a lateral, forward lateral stepping.
Okay.
It's if you understand that. Did we have a conversation before about gravity, or was that a movie I was watching?
That may have been a movie you were watching, but go ahead and talk about this potential conversation we had about gravity.
But there's the ideas of gravity, which are attributed often to the law being founded by Newton. And
it starts with Newton, yeah.
And then you get into...
Well, actually, technically, it goes back as far as Galileo.
Okay. Well,
He started
Galileo,
it.
Newton. And then you get into the 20th century and you find out that the laws of gravity just don't really work that well on a macro scale.
It's not that they don't work. It's that they need modification to work on a cosmological scale.
And so then you start getting into, like, Einstein.
Right. You get the field equation, general and special relativity. These are all about looking at referential frameworks.
And then you start getting into quantum.
Yes.
Okay, so was that a conversation we had?
I believe, yeah, last week we did have a short conversation on this.
So that's kind of similar to how theologians interpret the Bible. Like you still have the same core principles that are there, but you progressively have new discoveries about your interactions with them and scaling them to going from small tribes of 100 people versus another 100 people murdering each other to millions of people to billions of people
murdering each other.
You're going from 100 people with infinite resources to billions of people with finite resources, and you're still interpreting the same religious text, and you're seeing certain truths that still work, and you're seeing other things that require reinterpretation to make it fit. And I'm not saying that
but see, to atheists like me,
yeah.
This is one of the greatest arguments against a deity. If it requires constant reinterpretation, it, just like every other work of man, then it does not communicate in any shape, way, or form that it is divinely inspired.
Well, that would not indicate whether it's divinely inspired or not, because
No, it would indicate that it's not.
that would be if you're looking to the Bible to be proof of God, and not as a manuscript describing our relationship.
But see, that's the thing, though, is that when you look at most theists, the Bible is their evidence for God. But from a logical standpoint, the Bible is not even evidence; it's the claim.
I would say it's more of a written contract describing humanity's relationship with God.
Right, it's the claim that a deity exists.
I'm sorry?
It's part of the claim that a deity exists.
The claim is there, and this is
the claim is there in Genesis 1.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the book is just a continued description of the claim throughout
I think the
history.
claim of God's existence is the least important part of the Bible.
I would agree. When I was a Catholic, when I was a Methodist, yes, the claim that a God exists was one of the least important parts to me, and should have been. But as an atheist, I do think now that given that we know that people can make moral judgments and describe moral actions and generally function in society without any need of religiosity, regardless of level, now is the time to go back and really analyze that claim. Is this a valid claim? Is this claim supported? Is it rational to continue holding this position?
But if
to which I've obviously arrived at the position of no, it's not a valid position to hold.
But if you're an atheist, what is the justification for using your energy to refute a claim that ultimately has nothing to do with your forward progress in life?
Because of individuals choosing to use their religiosity and things they take from their religiosity to try and determine public policy.
So wouldn't the focus be on stopping it from entering public policy and not on deconstructing their reality?
If it hadn't already entered public policy, yes. But since it already has and is resoundingly ingrained in public policy, especially in this state, it becomes necessary to debunk it not just on a legislative level, but also a fundamental level.
I mean, I'd have to look at specific examples of how it enters public policy, because the fact that the Constitution was written from a deistic standpoint, where certain ideas of natural
the U.S.
rights,
Constitution, yes. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about for instance, it's still a law in the books that homosexual conduct is illegal in the state, even though Lawrence v. Texas in 2005 made that unenforceable. It's still on the books.
Yeah,
that's a law that was put in place on religious grounds.
At the time,
the fact that in 1954 we have this religious resurgence in the United States, where we suddenly want to put "in God we trust" and put "under God" in everything to do with our country.
When was that law written? I mean,
that was enacted in 1954. Under Eisenhower.
Are you talking about "in God we trust," or are we talking about the previous law about homosexual conduct?
Oh, homosexual conduct? I don't remember exactly when it went in, but I'd have to pull it up.
So I'm going to say something that's kind of an unpopular opinion, but I think it's important. People often link homophobia to Christianity because...
Not Christianity, religiosity.
religiosity, but specifically in America, we're talking about Christianity. In other parts of the world, we may be talking about different religions, but we're talking
Well, yes,
about
because Christianity is the majority religion in this country. I mean, so
right.
yes, it's an unavoidable comparison.
But here's the thing: just because the Bible, in a quasi fundamentalist but evangelical description, would define it as a sin. Was homophobia in the community using that as a justification for their own qualms with it? Or was the law written as a response to that religious viewpoint? And the reason I say that is because there are plenty of other actions that are considered sinful that there are zero laws regulating.
So section 21.06, homosexual conduct, as labeled, a person commits an offense if he engages in deviant sexual intercourse with another individual of the same sex, and labeled as a Class C misdemeanor, was passed under the 63rd legislation in 1973, effective January 1st, 1974. Amended in 1993, which is effective September 1st of 1994, and declared unconstitutional by Lawrence v. Texas in 2005.
I think I mean...
So, yeah, that would have been
a reaction
in response to religious pressure.
Would have been religious pressure, or would have been in response to the gay rights movement in the 60s and 70s? Because the moral majority didn't really hit full force until the 80s.
In the Texas legislature, it had, yeah.
The big protests where that was going on would have been late 70s at best, early 80s, 80 to 82. It would have started under Goldwater, but it didn't really get full steam until the Reagan era. And by the way, Goldwater was not a president. It's just a very important figure when we're talking about conservative ideology. That's Barry Goldwater for you non-political scientists. I mean, there's no doubt that there's some kind of connection between the two sides. But my question is, at what point did homophobia ride the coattails of religion as a justification, and then whenever it became not the main goal, or it became not acceptable, began to blame religion for it, and then they found a new target that they could hate on? Because there's always a group that gets hated on. That's just kind of how populism works. You know, before it was communists, back in the McCarthy era, which is the law you're discussing, that wasn't really written out of allegiance to God and holiness. That was written out of a refutation of the perceived atheism correlated with communism. Whether or not that's, you know, socialism and atheism are hand in hand, there are very public figures or public countries that we were very terrified of that were seen as atheistic.
Yeah, I mean, that does go back to McCarthyism, though. I mean, yes, it very much does. And McCarthy was hardcore religious man. I mean, so yes, they do use. So yes, it has been commonplace that religion is used as a cudgel. Yeah, and by both sides, by both Republican and Democrat. But
and then
yes, that was, but still, that was like the Un-American Activities Committee under McCarthy. Oh yeah. Are you an atheist? Was a question that was used to determine whether or not you were in league with the commies.
Yeah.
I mean, so yeah, yes. Um, so yeah, that actually just lends further credence to when the gay rights movement kicks off, which homosexuality is already preached as a sin within religious communities. Um, and you see this surgence of people seeking equal protection under the law, regardless of regardless of their sexual proclivities. Yeah, yes, it was the religious resurgence against that that led to these laws.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a chicken or egg sort of question to me. Is there definitely is religious element, but what were the people using the cudgel, or was religion using an opportunity? And I wasn't alive at the time,
Neither was I, obviously.
but it really looks like using religion is a popular tool for populist groups to use when something is icky to them.
It is, but that's the issue that atheists like me have, is they use
Yeah.
religion as the tool to insert something into government that otherwise would be considered completely reprehensible by the rest of us.
And I have a problem with that too, for to a large degree in a lot of different areas. I don't want people locking someone up and then saying that it's because my God told them to. My God didn't tell you to put anyone in jail.
No, from a Christian perspective, the Christian God famously doesn't tell people anything.
Hey now. Just does it through signs, you know? Like when that bird talked, I know I need to take my
Your schizophrenia medicine? Yeah, probably.
That's how God communicates to me. When
Yeah, I do find it rather odd though that a lot of things stop being attributed to divine prophecy, oracles, and things like that with the advent of in education in mental health in mental health, mental disabilities, and things like that, as well as the more scientifically advanced we've become, the less reliant on religion we've become.
It's also interesting that in the Old Testament, the prophetic diet naturally had antipsychotics in it.
Such as, you're gonna need to cite a source on that one, dude.
I've heard that lentils basically has a lot of stuff that's antipsychotic.
Lentils?
Yeah.
Uh,
I don't know. I've heard it somewhere. I have to look it up. I'm not a biochemist.
neither am I, but I mean, I don't know. Uh, hang on.
Do we get a comment, or are you doing some research?
I'm doing some research.
Are lentils antipsychotic?
Yes.
See, there's your answer from Drew's own mouth.
Ha 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 ha.
That's how presupposition works, everyone.
Exactly. It's complete bullshit. So,
I mean,
when talking about lentils, there are plentiful sources of fiber, folic acid, and potassium. They also contain uh, high levels of protein. The studies have also found that lentils also contain appreciable amounts of calcium and magnesium. And yeah, I guess they provide a large amount of folate. Folate is critical for preventing neural tube defects in newborns. Lentils also provide selenium. That's used as a part of a diet for lowering risk of colorectal, prostate, lung, bladder, skin, esophageal, and gastric cancers. But I don't see how. I don't know. Yeah, no, that's just folic acid. So, from a developmental standpoint, yeah, it can be. Folic acid is definitely helpful.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So low folates has been linked to an increased risk of depression and poor response to antidepressant treatment. But that's depression. So yes, to some degree, that is a mental malady, but nothing along the lines of being an antipsychotic.
So prophets weren't depressed due to their
Okay.
diet. Which makes a lot of sense when you think about all the stories of them like, hey,
Well, I mean, they
y'all.
think they're talking to God. I don't think anyone would be depressed at that point. It's like, wow, the big man upstairs is talking to me.
Well, there's the stories of where like you guys need to stop praying to your God, and they're just like, I'm just gonna sing, I'm gonna dance, can't stop me. So I guess that kind of makes sense then if you think about it.
Maybe, but still, I mean, the lentils are not antipsychotics, people. Sorry, they're not.
Yeah. All right, I was misinformed. I'll admit it. Don't listen to everything that CBN tells you.
I would argue don't listen to anything that CBN tells you for the most part. Like
Except for how to do your hair.
What?
Except for how to do your hair. Because them dudes are on point.
No. Sorry, I do not. You will never find me rocking the Pat Robertson. Sorry.
What about the guy that looks like a cranky Sam Elliott?
I'm not familiar with him. I don't pay a lot of attention to CBN, aside from some of their articles, which are, how do I put this gently? Fucking atrocious.
There's a dude on there that he kind of looks like a poor man Sam Elliott wearing a white tux.
That sounds like Christian Colonel Sanders.
He kind of does kind of.
I mean, when you say it like that, it's like, no, that sounds like that sounds like conservative Christian Colonel Sanders.
All right, so all of this to say, basically, either people need to stop trying to legislate against things that they don't like, or they need to just go full blown and like start whipping people for eating cheeseburgers and lobster. Like one way or the other, but not any more of this in between stuff. If you're going to take it literally and this is a sinful thing, or whatever, are listed in there, you just go
I mean,
full blown and see if you can live your own standard without ending up in a jail.
Watch that. That'll be the new Christian fad. We'll call it the Levitican lifestyle.
Basically, what's the thing in the Bible where it's like, judge not lest ye be judged? Yeah, stop judging other people unless you can live up to the perfect standard.
Exactly, and you can't.
Oh. Yeah. Your parents told you to take the trash out, and you're like, I'm busy. Oh, there you go. Time to start doing penance. Pull out the cat o' nine tails.
Whippica.
All right, so basically, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, like, cause it. Okay. So a friend of mine posited this to me, when he was talking about Christians, and he's not an atheist, by the way.
Okay.
He says Christians are Jews that don't Jew right.
I can see that.
because Christians completely ignore Levitican law, even though it still applies.
Yeah.
I mean, like, for instance, I'll pull this from a religious source.
Except for the whole diet thing, because there is a Bible verse.
This comes from Olive Tree, Matthew 5:17-20.
Okay.
Don't misunderstand why I have come. I did not come to abolish the law of Moses or the writings of the prophets. No, I came to accomplish their purpose. I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth disappear, not even the smallest detail of God's law will disappear until its purpose is achieved. So if you ignore the least commandment and teach others to do the same, you will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven.
Okay.
But anyone who obeys God's laws and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. But I warn you, unless your righteousness is better than the righteousness of the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Then, to go full on Southern conservative Christian, them's the red words, them's important ones.
Yep. Those are. And that means that there is no action you can do that will get. And I've got to look something up real quick.
Okay. But yeah.
So you're just gonna have to pretty face.
All we see is a black screen right now, dude. What happened to you using your laptop, by the way?
Oh, it was terrible, and the sound quality was bad. And it took forever.
I agree with you on that one.
All right. I think
I'm going to be upgrading my camera and mic setup though. So I mean, if you want, once I get those replaced, you're more than welcome to actually, unless I don't get a different mount, have the mic and camera that I'm using right now, and they're both USB powered, so you can just plug them right into the laptop and use them. Besides, I plan on making at least one trip down to Houston before something else happens in my personal life that will be a pretty big change for me. But I think we'll be one better. Go for it.
Acts 10:9. About noon the next day, as they were on their journey and approaching the city, Peter went up on the roof to pray. He became hungry and wanted something to eat. And while it was being prepared, he fell into a trance. He saw the heaven open and something like a large sheet coming down, being lowered to the ground by its four corners. In it were all kinds of four-footed creatures and reptiles and birds of the air. Then he heard a voice saying, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat," which is like the most East Texan Bible verse ever.
Yeah. Hang on. The book of Nugent, chapter 2, verse 23. Kill it and grill it.
Yeah. All right. But Peter said, "By no means, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is profane or unclean." The voice said to him again a second time, "What God has made clean, you must not call profane." This happened 3 times, and the thing was suddenly taken up to heaven.
Right, but in context, that's only talking about those things.
About food.
No, it's only talking about what was put in front of him on that sheet.
Yes, but it was all kinds of food. All
right.
kinds of things.
That doesn't translate to anything else, though. That context only refers to those specific items.
Okay, so chapter 11. Now the apostles and the believers who were in Judea heard that the Gentiles had also accepted the word of God. So when Peter went up to Jerusalem, and just to explain, so the Christian Jews were going over to the Christians who are new Christians that hadn't previously been Jews.
Mm-hmm.
And Peter went up to Jerusalem to the circumcised, accepted the word of God. So when Peter went up to Jerusalem, the circumcised believers who had followed the law criticized him, saying, "Why did you go to the uncircumcised men and eat with them?" Then Peter began to explain step by step the story from the previous chapter. I was in this, I was in a trance, saw vision. When they came close to me, as I looked, There were four-footed animals, reptiles, birds of prey. I heard a voice saying, "Get up, kill and eat." I replied, "By no means. What God has made clean, you must not call profane." The Spirit told me to go. At that very moment, 3 men sent to me from Caesarea arrived at the house where we were. The Spirit told me to go with them and not to make a distinction between them and us. These 6 brothers also accompanied me, and we entered the man's house. He told us how he had seen an angel standing in his house and saying, "Send to Joppa and bring Simon, who is called Peter. He will give you a message by which you and your entire household will be saved."
Okay.
So right there, it is saying that basically, if you are a Gentile, then some of the old rules that are more cultural should not prohibit you from being able to accept salvation.
Well,
Now,
except they were labeled as Christian already, and so they could accept salvation because they were Christian.
Well,
that's part of where the Catholic dogma of absolution of sins comes from. Absolution of past sins.
So these were just some dude from Caesarea. It doesn't say he was previously a Christian.
No, it says in there earlier on when he went to non-Jewish Christians' houses and ate with them, and then Jewish Christians bitched about it because they weren't circumcised.
He will give you a message by which your entire household will be saved. I guess in a evangelical reading, if you haven't received salvation, you're not a Christian yet.
Well, that whole evangelical thing didn't come about till several centuries later. Little over a millennia.
And then they praise God, saying, "Then God has given even to the Gentiles the repentance that leads to life."
Right.
Because
so that doesn't excuse from Levitican law. It's absolving them of past sins.
Yes.
In that they will sin, in that they will, in the Catholic faith, go forth and sin no more. Yes. So it's not saying Levitican law doesn't apply. It just means that because you're becoming Christian, we're going to forgive you those past transgressions because you're starting anew. It's also part of the concept of born again Christians.
I could agree with that interpretation.
And hence the joking phrase, Christians are Jews that don't Jew right.
And yes, I can get that from that perspective. Yeah. It's been years of
granted we're also talking about a book that thought bats were birds.
Well, they fly.
Okay. That doesn't make it a bird.
If you've never seen a bat egg before?
No, because there aren't bat eggs.
And why aren't there bat eggs?
Because they're not birds.
Then echidna.
Okay. An echidna is not a bat.
It lays an egg.
That doesn't make it a bat.
It doesn't make it a bird.
No, it doesn't. It's an egg-laying mammal.
Okay. Likely story.
It's a mustelid, I think is what it's referred to. No, I think mustelids are weasels. Oh,
aren't emus?
What?
Aren't emus? Don't they have fur instead of feathers?
No, they have. They're fully plumed.
Oh, okay. They just don't preen very well then. Because they always look like they stuck their beak in an electric socket.
Yeah.
Ostriches are like very graceful. Like their feathers are nice. Emus look a little rough.
Well, emus are also further back on the evolutionary timescale than ostriches are.
You and your evolution again.
Because emus have arms.
I have an arm too, but that doesn't mean I'm far back on your evolutionary scale.
Well, in that they have arms like legitimate arms that end in fingers, versus ostriches whose arms have become wings.
Are we at the point where we can basically accept that Stephen Hawking wasn't really advocating the existence of the Judeo-Christian God? He was just
Yeah.
poetically equating the laws of science to a higher form of
Yeah,
presence.
this is basically him trying to analogize complex concepts in science.
Yeah, and I guess my main point about the whole gravity thing is that, you know, there's something we can agree on, is that what I get tired of is whenever a lot of people who are quasi scientific and they hate religion for being stuck in the past, they're like, well, science is the ultimate way. And then sometimes, you know, there's going to be one person like me that's like, but what if something disproves it? And they'll be like, it'll never be disproven. It's science. And then there's someone like you that's going to be like, well, technically, better science disproves bad science.
Well, hang on. This is where we have a bit of an issue here, though, is that Newton wasn't disproven.
He wasn't disproven.
No, it was found that his works in specific referential frameworks.
Yeah.
Einstein's works in a broader referential framework, but it also works in the local framework just as well, if not better than Newton's. It's just a lot more complex.
Yeah.
So it's not dismissing anything that Newton ever did. It's not saying Newton was wrong. It's that Newton didn't have the ability to look past a certain point. Einstein, by the simple coincidence of living closer to modern day, had access to better technology, better tools, better ways of measurement, things like that, that allowed him to be more specific in how gravity works.
So I guess let's use a different example. We went from a pretty solid scientific foundation of the was it the heliocentric universe?
Well, that's currently what we consider things now, is the heliocentric model of the solar system.
Kind of, but we went from that.
No, we orbit the sun. The sun is the center of our solar system. Heliocentric.
Well, yes, but I can't think of what it's actually called now, where we understand there's ellipsis and not perfect circles.
Yes, we're in an elliptical orbit, not a circular orbit.
Yeah, there we go. So we went from an Earth central to a Sun central to a elliptical, where where the planets aren't always on the same orbit. Wow, that looks really weird on the camera when I do that. Sorry.
Quit framing your face. This isn't a 70s dance party. Just no.
Anyway, that was the worst time to do. Please edit that out. But though, I guess that's
this is live. You can't escape it. I don't go back and retro edit these.
I just got to live with that
for the rest of your life. You and your little Republican Party t-shirt, making an ass of yourself, framing your face in a dance move, live on YouTube. Forever. Or until I pull the video down, which I won't do.
Or until your account goes dormant and they delete it for extra space.
Which, I mean, I have no intention of going dormant, so.
Yeah. Anyway, so, as we were saying, so there are some things, but I guess that would be the only one. Oh, Aether. There's that one. We don't believe in Ether anymore.
Ether? Oh, yeah. No, that was...
But that was scientific fact for a long time.
No, it wasn't even scientific fact. It was like we don't even classify ether theory as ether theory anymore. It was the ether hypothesis, and it never really garnered wide acceptance. It was just one step further along the line.
It was pretty widely accepted from what I saw because electromagnetic waves hadn't been introduced yet, so it was the only way to explain certain things.
Yeah, true.
So I think when a lot of people try to like ignore ether, they're basically living in denial. Like, yeah, that was us back then.
No, I don't ignore it. I mean, it was accepted by some people back then, and yes, it it explained things until it couldn't.
Yeah.
And that's the way I see religion, is that religion explained things until it couldn't. Like the whole start of religion was to explain naturalistic phenomena. And as we gained greater knowledge in the world around us, more and more of that started getting peeled away.
And
I mean, and people were fine with just using that to describe natural phenomena. I mean, you look at the whole thing about Mount Olympus and the Greek gods. Nobody ever thought to climb the fucker, to go take a look.
Didn't the Romans like put it on the Mars or something weird? Like they put it on like a celestial body. I could have sworn like because it became pretty apparent they could just climb it, and they're like, "Oh, we must be talking about something up there."
Maybe I don't know for sure. I'd have to go back and look at that one. But I mean, for Greek history, it's like, why didn't you just climb the hill and look and be like, no, they're not there. We can just fuck off right back down now.
Yeah.
I mean,
piss off, ghost.
I mean, yeah.
All right.
All right, so moving on to the next article.
Well, there was something I was going to bring up.
Okay, go ahead.
Kind of I was listening to National Public Radio.
Okay. NPR for the uncultured.
Yeah. I listen to NPR all the time.
NPR is all right.
If you have money and you're listening right now and you don't feel like giving to his Patreon, I would definitely recommend giving to NPR. They have fantastic entertainment on there whenever their political, what are they called? Their political analytics people completely misinterpret everything that's going on right now in the impeachment.
Yeah, and that was actually I was a little surprised at just how much NPR got wrong on that.
And how much they continue to get wrong.
Like, that really surprised me. I'm like, NPR used to be part of the gold standard, right next to AP, the Associated Press, and Thomson Reuters. Like, they used to be a member of the gold standard, and now it's like, what the hell has happened to you guys?
Yeah, whenever
they've gone further and further left, going back to about the last couple of years of Clinton, I would say.
Yeah, their opinion people are pretty awful at either not really knowing how politics works, not knowing how law works, or they're really just trying to preach to the choir. So there's some serious.
I wouldn't even say that it's preaching to the choir so much as instead of the way NPR used to go, which was people who are retiring from the political arena or legal professions and stuff like that becoming journalists for NPR. Now NPR is hiring journalists right out of college or people with nothing but journalistic experience. Even if they are reporting on politics or the legal system, this, that, and the other, they don't seem to have a lot of experience in the legal system or in the political arena. And so I think that's part of what has caused this lapse in quality from NPR. And granted, this is coming from a guy sitting in his apartment in Texas who, I mean, by all technicality, doesn't have a degree to his name at all. I'll freely admit that right now. I don't have a degree. I'm working on it. Harry here has a degree in political science. But, I mean, yeah.
I would say, and this is getting a little bit into the, I want to call it a conspiracy because it's an analysis that doesn't really have all of the proof behind it, but it makes a lot of sense.
I'll say I wouldn't necessarily call it a conspiracy at this point. I'd say at this point, this is your hypothesis.
Yeah.
That requires experimentation and testing to find evidence for it.
I hypothesize that there were some legendary reporters in the 60s and 70s and early 80s that really did an amazing work.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, they were pushed out of mainstream journalism, either because the way journalism was going, they weren't going to be in the field as much and they wanted to sit behind a desk, or because they didn't have the creative control to tell the truth as they saw it and understood it. And NPR really leaned upon those legendary figures to be their desk. And unfortunately, those figures are at the end of their careers now, which means that they're bringing in a whole slew of people who are unvetted.
People who would be better suited for BuzzFeed news.
Yes. People that need to go out in the field and actually do their research and experience cultures before they start having opinions.
Exactly. In all honesty, I think one person that would be an outstanding candidate for working with NPR or potentially taking over a desk at NPR would be Tim Pool.
Okay.
You should check out his YouTube channel. In fact, everyone should. Tim Pool is, and this is going to strike you as odd, he's quite the unicorn these days and has been for a while. He's a social and legislative Democrat for the most part with some moderate viewpoints who has been entirely pro-Trump through the impeachment proceedings.
Okay.
Completely. Seen it as a complete miscarriage of justice on the part of the Democratic Party.
Speaking of the Trump impeachment, I can't remember who it was that said it, but it was in one of the opening arguments, either last week or the week before, because this trial is taking forever. But there was a really great quote, and it was by a Republican senator or his legal team, and it summarized exactly how I feel about this whole thing. Because I'm not super on board with he's innocent. No, it was what he did in the call. Does it have consequences? Yes. And those consequences are that we are sitting here having this trial, discussing it, and trying to figure out if it was good or bad. It was not the best thing to do in the world. But is it a high crime and a misdemeanor? And I thought that's exactly how I feel about this. We have to get all of this because of a sloppy call.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, due to sloppy verbiage in a call. You're right. And correct me if I'm wrong. They haven't actually played an audio recording of this. They've just read the transcript.
That's correct.
So there's been no look at vocal intonation, the quality of the call, how things were said. They're just looking at verbiage and nothing else.
Yeah, and what this guy was
That
arguing,
strikes me as kind of off, because like when you look at criminal proceedings at the state level for anything, if there's a phone call about something
yeah,
and they have access to the audio of the call, they play the call and hand out a transcript.
but this call I think has executive privilege on it. You can't play the actual call. You can only get the transcript, which is highly redacted.
Okay.
But
It's still,
yeah,
if it, why couldn't they get access to the audio file of just the unredacted portion, the one that they're all bitching and moaning about? See, that strikes me as something that they should be able to do, especially in an impeachment proceeding as part of discovery.
maybe Trump was playing Nickelback in the background, and they didn't want to.
Oh, could be. Could have been playing Rockstar. Could have been playing Nickelback's Rockstar in the background.
I think that would, if I was ever president, I would have completely inappropriate soundtracks in the back of important calls. Just like we're having a press conference with, like, I don't know, pick a country.
And you've got Hypnotized by Notorious B.I.G. playing in the background.
Or I was thinking about like from National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Melikamiki Waka is the nice way.
Or
You're like,
or even go so far as to play Get to the Choppa or Rubber Baby Buggy Bumpers by Austrian Death Machine.
yes.
The Arnold Schwarzenegger inspired metal band. Personally, I'd be playing probably White Wine Spritzer by Oakley Dokley. For those of you who do not know, Oakley Dokley is an entirely Ned Flanders themed metal band. Yes, based off the Simpsons character. They even go so far as to wear the green sweater, the khakis, the hairdo, the mustache, the glasses, the pink collared shirt, the whole 9 yards. Actually, you know what? No, actually, you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna introduce people to this. This has, huh?
Oh, please.
Yes, we're introducing people to Oakley Dokley. Just because it's too out there for people to honestly entertain as real.
I'll finish what I like about NPR. So, in all seriousness, they come up with slice of life commentary and stories that are outside of what I would normally get. Like they have a food section, they have an other culture section where like people will talk about what specific families are dealing with in other countries.
Mm-hmm.
They have a market watch thing. They got a lot of things on there that are really good that you don't get. That are really one-on-one journalism stories. It's their nationwide stuff I don't really care about. But
no, I agree with you on that one. It's like it's really kind of gone by the wayside these last 15, hell, almost 25 years. It's been just this slow death.
But I guess their human interest pieces are par none. Like they are amazing.
Yes, they have been fantastic in world reporting on things like human trafficking and stuff like that. Their investigative journalism on the global stage, oh, absolutely is second to none. It's just when it comes to dealing with things on the home front, when it gets into the political arena or just national news in general, for the most part, it's really suffered.
Yeah.
But there again, when you get into world news, when you get into things like these investigative pieces on stuff like human trafficking, that's something that it truly does. It transcends party lines. It transcends belief systems. And it's something that everyone can get behind as, no, this is a bad thing. So
you went the complete serious route. And I'm over here talking about their human interest pieces where it's like my grandpa retired and started a cheese farm.
Okay, yeah, some of those are actually pretty damn funny.
and they're awesome. I love that stuff.
Yeah.
It's so informational.
Like, if I remember right, they did like a whole thing on this guy named George Motes.
Hmm.
He's like the burger professor. He spent like the last 20 or 30 years studying the American hamburger.
Yeah.
Like, and it's really interesting. You get a good dose of Motes' stuff if you go to the First We Feast YouTube channel and look at specifically the burger show.
They had another one this morning about the science fiction writer who she's black, and she was talking about how when she grew up, she would read these stories, and the publishers had basically whitewashed the characters,
Mhm.
or they would put like on the cover white characters when the story explicitly describes the main character as being black.
Mhm.
And so she didn't really feel comfortable writing about science fiction until she had a period where she got over it, and there's not a whole lot of black science fiction writers, and she was talking about that, and I thought that was a really interesting story. I was listening this morning about how even the science fiction award that they give out is a bust of H.P. Lovecraft, who was notoriously racist.
Oh yeah,
Like his
he wrote
writing
good
is
horror. It's like yes, he was a bad person outside of his literary career. Uh, is but he did write some good horror. That doesn't
like his
excuse his that does not excuse his racism at all. But it's just
but here's the thing. I'm not going to say that it excuses it, because it doesn't, but his racism explains why his stories are so terrifying, because you're not just looking into someone terrified of this weird nebulous space monster. You're
mhm.
looking into the mind of someone who sees human beings of other races as weird nebulous space monsters, and you're
Yes, it's
seeing
so
what
weird.
it's
Yeah,
looking into the mind of a killer, basically.
to an extent, yeah. Mind of a serial
And
killer who didn't kill anyone.
yeah, I think that's what makes his stories have even more traction, is understanding how messed up.
He was
And
as an individual.
probably,
That's one of the reasons why Edgar Allan Poe has stayed so prolific, because of all of his personal demons informing some of the really fucked up stuff that he wrote.
yeah. We don't know of anything, or at least I don't know of anything explicitly hateful about Edgar Allan Poe.
I don't know of anything explicitly hateful about him.
I just
Um,
know how tragic it was. Like,
yeah,
tuberculosis haunted him.
true. Perving on his cousin.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty bad.
Yeah,
But I guess in that century, that was normal.
still. But anyway, let's go ahead and get this thing about Oakley Dokley out of the way, so we can get on to the next story. Just because I know people are gonna say it's complete nonsense unless I play this for them. So all rights obviously reserved by Oakley Dokley. This is just to get y'all's music out there, because in all honesty, I think it's pretty cool. Hopefully everyone can hear this.
I can't hear anything.
Say what?
I can hear nothing.
You can't?
I can hear
Okay.
you talking.
Okay. That's weird. I had it set up to where on screen share it should be playing sound. That's really strange.
Oh, and the reason I brought up NPR in the first place is because they got a story that basically
Oh, I didn't
scientifically
click the thing that says share audio. Okay. They've changed it where it has to be done a particular way. Anyway, go ahead
people
and
didn't
share your thing about NPR real quick. What?
the people didn't evolve to give live birth.
Oh. But yeah, Ned Flanders theme metal band.
Nice.
What's that?
I will check them out later, and all of you watching this, all of the 0 people in our live stream, and the people who will view it later should check them out as well. Give them some likes and subscribe because they are oakley
Yes,
doakley.
absolutely. Very much so. They are hilarious. In fact, I went back because I'm logged into my Atheist Reformation YouTube right now for the channel. So I went ahead and gave them a like in an official capacity as well.
Oh, but yeah, that's what I was saying. The whole story of why we got into that rabbit trail about NPR was that they have someone who said that humans did not evolve to give life birth, and I thought that was fascinating.
What?
Yeah, it's not a human evolution.
How is it not? That doesn't make much sense.
Because there is a virus that intercepted and altered humanity from giving, according to them, the virus is what created the human ability to create a placenta.
Okay.
There's a red.
Yes, they're called ERVs. They're called endogenous retroviruses. That goes back millions of years in evolutionary development. This goes back to to placental mammals.
Yeah,
like we evolved and shared common ancestry with placental mammals. So
that's
yes,
what I'm talking about.
we did evolve to give live birth. There's no way we ever could have not given live birth and still be related to these other animals.
The virus. So I guess we're talking about the split from egg-laying mammals to placental mammals.
Mm-hmm.
The existence of the placenta is an introduction from the retrovirus. So information was inserted into that stage that created the ability to form the placenta. So it was intelligently designed. I mean, that's not what they said in it. I'm just saying that the virus is what caused it. Somehow a virus got introduced and it all.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, ERVs, endogenous retroviruses. We know this. That's how we determined what separates placental mammals such as ourselves from egg-laying mammals like platypi and echidna.
But where did the retrovirus come from?
It already existed.
How? Where?
It didn't exist just to do that. That's just the effect it had on mammalian DNA.
But how would it have been able to exist if it didn't have a way to replicate? Viruses have to replicate.
Yeah. There's a myriad of different ways of viral transmission.
No. Well, anyway, I thought that was
from contracting it through. There's environmental contractions. You can get it through contaminated food and water supply. It could have. Mammal could have eaten something that had this virus that then replicated within its own DNA. Like there's a myriad of different ways that it could have happened, all of which are entirely natural.
Oh well.
And in fact, if not for something like that, mammalian life could not have become as complex as it has.
This is road trip logic, where us discussing NPR leading up to this was much more fascinating and interesting than when we actually arrived at our destination and talked about retrovirus.
It gets that way sometimes.
Yeah.
All right, but anyway, so now we are going to talk about why do people distrust atheists?
because atheists are not watching the Super Bowl right now.
Oh, is the Super Bowl today?
Either that or my neighbor is a SEAL. And
I mean, they could be. You never know. Don't judge them. All right, so we're looking at this article here from Neuroscience News. Why some people distrust atheists. This came near the end of last year on December 26th. So as of right now, this comes from the conversation of 25% of the population in the U.S. identify as non-religious, with 3% actively identifying as atheist. Researchers investigate why many people distrust those who identify as being atheist.
Congratulations, you're a higher percent than milk.
Say what?
You're a higher percent than milk.
I'm pretty sure my fat content is quite a bit higher than that of milk. It's definitely more than single digits, so, you know. Besides, I only drink whole milk. I don't do that 2% crap or skim milk. I agree with Ron Swanson. The only thing I hate more than lying is skim milk, which is water that's lying about being milk. So anyway, an ad featuring Ron Reagan, son of the Republican former President Ronald Reagan, surprised some viewers of the recent Democratic primary debates. In the 30-second spot run by the Freedom from Religion Foundation, Reagan expressed concern that religious beliefs have gained too much political influence in the United States. Reagan signed off by describing himself as a lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell. His detractors expressed alarm. They were concerned that an unabashed atheist, a person who lacks belief in a god or gods, could speak so bluntly on national television. And the ad inspired some strong reactions, with some major networks even banning it from the airwaves. And perhaps that should be unsurprising.
Ron?
What?
Is this his son, Ron, or is this actual President?
No. It says up here, an ad featuring Ron Reagan, son of the Republican former President Ronald Reagan.
Because I've heard this quote getting thrown around on Facebook a lot recently, attributing it to President Ronald Reagan.
No, it is Ron Reagan, Ronald Reagan's son.
Okay.
Who said this?
So Ron Reagan is the lifelong atheist.
Yes.
Ronald Reagan was not, or was an atheist?
Ronald Reagan was was president. That's as far as we're getting into that one.
Okay. That's the precedent we're setting about the president.
Yes. The presidential precedent, as it were, is that he was president. Research shows that there is intense prejudice against atheists in the United States. Of the approximately 25% of the U.S. population who do not identify as religious, a little over 3% identify specifically as atheists, although some researchers claim the actual number might be as high as 20%. What's behind the distrust? Because of this prejudice, people might be reluctant to identify themselves as atheists, even on anonymous questionnaires. Research shows that atheists are trusted less than religious people. In fact, even atheists, in some instances, trust their fellow atheists less than religious people. And until recently, a majority of Americans believed that atheists are not moral. University of Kentucky scholar Will Gervais and colleagues have found that people in several countries even tend to associate serial murder with atheism relative to religious belief. Even though when you go back through history, virtually every single serial killer was religious.
Really?
Yeah. Like an overwhelming amount. Social psychologists have spent years examining what causes some people to have negative feelings, thoughts, and behavior towards atheists. Some work argues, for example, that atheists are disliked because they remind religious believers of their inevitable mortality. That is, atheists deny the existence of an afterlife. When reminded of death, this theory suggests religious people respond with increased prejudice toward atheists. Our 2018... Say what?
I felt that. I'm guilty of that. I will admit. There's been several times where I really just dislike having an atheist around because it reminds me that I'm going to die.
Yeah, we're all going to die. It's
like
inevitable. What?
I don't like nihilists.
But still, nihilism isn't just saying everything is pointless, we're all going to die. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I'm an existentialist. You exist. Yeah. Okay? You exist. That's all you have. You make your purpose. You define you. In all honesty, knowing that this is all I've got, that this life that I'm in now, that has honestly made me want to do better than when I was religious. I can honestly say that since getting out of religion and becoming atheist, I personally have become a better person.
And honestly, I kind of have a similar outlook since my change in perspective on heaven and hell, where I don't look at the pearly gates and the afterlife as being that important. The focus is on the kingdom of God and the realization of doing his will in the here and now. Because I don't get an opportunity to make a difference after I'm dead. It's just going to be heaven. This is the only place that I can make a difference and try to do something according to his will.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one thing that's always kind of pissed me off about religious people in general. They're like, oh, you think this is the only life you've got, so why even bother trying to change anything? Because we understand that there are going to be people, at least for some time, after we're dead. We don't like where we're at now, which means that there are probably going to be people who don't like where we're at later. So we want things to be put in place to try and make things as beneficial mutually as we possibly can, not just for ourselves, but for successive generations. Because I'm sorry, not every atheist is, against having children and things like that. Yeah. It's like me. I've got kids. Why do I try to make things change for what I consider better and more beneficial for humanity? Because I'm one of the assholes that lives in the world. Or to quote Star-Lord from Guardians of the Galaxy, why do you care about saving the universe? Because I'm one of the idiots that lives in it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all that it takes. And my kids live in it. So I want a better world for them. Pretty simple.
Yeah.
2018 study on the prejudices that religious believers hold against atheists, conducted along with our colleagues at Arizona State University, examined one previously unexplored cause of atheist prejudice: perceptions of their sexual behavior. Evidence suggests that religion and sexual behavior are often linked. Many major religions, such as Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and some traditional religions, promote lifestyles emphasizing fidelity and underscoring the importance of caring for one's family. And a large body of research suggests that such religions may be especially attractive to people who value such commitments, perhaps precisely because those religions help to reinforce their own lifestyle choices. This is not to say that all sexually committed people are religious or vice versa. Rather, this seems to be a stereotype. For example, many atheists are married and around 40% have young children. So, yeah, that's still just a stupid stereotype that people put out there, that atheists are unmarried, sexually promiscuous, and don't want kids and don't ever have kids. Quite the contrary.
Well, you know why that is persisting, though?
In large part due to religiosity.
No. I mean, there's some degree of that, but
there is a lot of degree of that when you look at some of your what would be considered in some circumstance labeled hate preachers, like some of those that you see, like Jim Baker, the stuff that's been said by people like Robert Tilton, Creflo Dollar, your prosperity gospel people. I mean, people can argue, people can bitch, moan, and groan all day about saying that those individuals don't represent Christianity. Okay, that's fine. You can claim they don't represent Christianity. The fact of the matter still remains is they do.
I'm going to flip the coin.
They are Christian. That's an inescapable fact. You may not like you may not like how they do things. You may not like how they use their religion as a Ponzi scheme to bleed their congregants out of money, but that doesn't make them not the thing they claim to be.
But flip the coin over. Who advocates non-traditional relationships? Like,
Democrats?
Huh?
Democrats?
Well, I'm not even going to go that far. I mean, have you ever heard a highly religious person outside of the fundamentalist sect of groups that were out in West Texas and New Mexico and Southern Utah? I can't remember the exact name of them, but outside of that group, who advocates non-traditional relationships? Either no marriage or don't have kids and all
Atheists
that stuff.
don't advocate for non-traditional relationships, and atheism is not part of that at all.
I know, but
they in fact they don't even advocate for it. They say these are free consenting adults. They should be allowed to do what they want.
Right, but what I'm
that's
saying
not advocacy.
The individuals who are advocating destroy the patriarchy, don't have traditional relationships, have polyamorous relationships, the actual people, the individuals that are advocating it, are they religious or are they non-religious or are they neo-pagan?
I honestly don't think that many of them have actually been polled, because they don't really care about their religious background, or they don't care about their level of religiosity. I will say I have not seen a study on it.
I haven't seen a study on
I see a lot of assumptions. I don't see studies.
How many studies?
Assumptions are like assholes. Everybody's got one and they all stink usually.
Okay, but how many studies did you see talking about those televangelists and the views that they espouse? That wasn't a study. That was anecdotal information that is accurate, and I'm willing.
No, it's not even anecdotal. It's not even anecdotal information. Anecdotal information would be just what I personally experience. Except I can objectively show what positions they claim to hold, what beliefs they claim to hold, by bringing up videos of they themselves saying those things. That's not anecdotal evidence. That's evidence.
Okay, but it's not saying what their it's not like a scientific study that shows what their allegiances are percentage-wise between a population subsect. That's what we're talking about. Because I can pull up evidence of people in videos showing that they're espousing non-traditional relationships, that they're espousing don't have children. And we can find out by looking at who that person is, what religion they are, or what lack of religion they are.
Okay.
And it just so happens that the people that say that the loudest, a big part of it are going to be people who are from Planned Parenthood, the activists that are associated with them, and comedians that are supportive of them have definitely made some public comments about it.
Okay.
Now, what are their religious views? And whenever you look up the individuals, you'll see that they're either irreligious or they're atheists. You don't have a whole lot of devout religious people that are advocating non-traditional relationships.
But again, they're not necessarily advocating for them. Like when you talk about the comedians and stuff like that, they're not advocating for those relationships. They are advocating the freedom to have those relationships if someone chooses to do so. That's the majority.
I'm talking specifically about people that are not advocating freedom of people to be able to be themselves and not be persecuted. I'm talking specifically about the people that say that people should not have traditional relationships anymore because the world is being overpopulated and it is irresponsible to produce more children.
Okay.
There are people that have that viewpoint.
Yes, there are some that hold that viewpoint, yes.
And that's what I'm talking about as advocates of non-traditional relationships.
Okay.
The people that are for it, not the people who are saying we need to be more accepting of people that are different than us. That's different. That's across the board. That's okay. I'm talking about the people that are specifically trying to destroy what they perceive as the patriarchal structure and confines of traditional marriage within America that they feel is irresponsible moving forward and is dated to Victorian era.
Okay. But again, that doesn't really have anything to do with being atheist or atheism in general. Like, that doesn't have anything to do with it.
Well, it's because
is there a correlative relationship? Yes, it's not a causal one.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we can point to a myriad of instances where, some incredibly high profile, extremely religious individuals are engaged in these non-traditional relationships. Great famous example would be Ted Haggard.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a hate preacher. Actively advocating the persecution of homosexuals, caught soliciting a man in a bathroom for gay sex.
I'm pretty sure he was the one that was also caught with meth.
Yeah.
That he thought that the prostitute was just going to give him a back rub.
Yeah, that was great.
I think the bathroom one was a different person. I'm not even sure that was a preacher. I think it might have been a politician.
That might have been a politician. Yeah, you're right. But Haggard was caught like multiple times.
Yeah.
It was definitely more than once. That's for sure. I mean, so
don't underestimate the power and strength of crocodile tears. And don't underestimate the fact that a lot of people will forgive someone that shows
apparent contrition
and a lot of guilt because they empathize with it, because they too are probably guilty of something and they can see themselves in that other person's sin.
Possibly.
Because I'm just going to lay it out there. Here's how a lot of evangelicals are whenever they see someone public like that. And they're like, oh, everyone falls. And here's what's going on in the back of their head. Okay. For those of you out there that are atheists that ever want to know what's going on in an evangelical's head, here's what happens. The minute that you find out, oh, so-and-so, they were in the middle of a coke-fueled orgy and they cheated on their wife with 12 supermodels. In the back of their head, they're thinking, the good Lord said, if you think of it, so have you done. And man, I've seen some supermodels that I wouldn't mind. That's a sin right there.
Yeah, and that's another big problem that atheists have with religion is it's not about punishing actions, it's about punishing thought crimes.
I'm going to have to... Okay, so it's a self-imposed thing. It's not like the government is coming after you for a thought crime. It's you really got to... The whole purpose of what he was saying is you've got to stop judging other people whenever you have the same thoughts. They just had weaker self-control. It's not good. It doesn't justify it. But just because
but no, when you look at the Ten Commandments and stuff like that, it's describing thought crimes. Thou shalt not covet.
which one?
That's a thought crime.
Yeah, well, to a degree.
That is a thought crime.
But specifically, what is coveting?
Huh?
What is
Covetous
specific?
thoughts?
What is? Let's define it. It's a little different than just. It's different. It's bad.
No, like, okay, hang on.
It's worse than the thought. It's a harmful thought. It's a bad thought.
Okay, the Hebrew word translated covet is chamad, which is commonly translated into English as covet, lust, and strong desire.
Okay.
The Hebrew Bible contains a number of warnings and examples of negative consequences for lusting or coveting. It's a thought crime.
Okay, but what is the actual Ten Commandment? And then let's put that in there.
Thou shalt not covet. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. Okay, let me pull that specific verse up. Oh wait, no. Okay, Exodus 20:17. I'll just use ESV because that's generally in. This is from Bible Gateway. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his manservant, or his female servant, his ox, his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's.
So, first of all,
it's still a thought crime.
It is. I'll give you that to a degree. It's a thought crime, but it's a self-imposed higher level. No one's going to look into your brain. First thing.
No, but God does.
Yes, God does.
Okay, so the religion punishes thought crimes.
But how does God punish it?
By condemning you to an eternal torment.
And then what is your way out of that?
Aside from repentance while you're alive, there isn't one.
Okay, and what does repentance actually mean? It means that you're acknowledging that you have committed a sin and that your ability to move on is not within your control entirely. It's basically stepping down from arrogance.
Okay, but even repenting from it, that's repenting from that act that doesn't have anything to do with further thoughts you have down the line. And all it would take effectively is one slip up. Oh, I forgot to go repent for this one thought. Now I'm burning in hell for all eternity.
Now we're getting into once saved, always saved, which is a purely Protestant evangelical argument as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, it is. Okay,
so then we're getting into a different realm there, and I'm not going to be able to. I don't have the theological backing in order to defend a perspective that's outside of my own. So, but in my upbringing and my interpretation of the Bible, that would have those things covered under once saved, always saved doctrine.
Okay.
But going back to it, look, I'm gonna say, first of all, if it's a thought crime, it's also a thought punishment. But second of all, coveting's a bad thing. Like, it's one thing to be like, oh man, I really want a nice house. I want like a 2-story house. Man, that's a cool house. Like, I want a house that has some of those features. And to be like, I want that person's house. They don't deserve that house. I deserve it. That's a toxic thing, you know? Like, it's one thing to be like, dude, your wife's really beautiful. Congratulations, man. Y'all make a beautiful couple. And to be like Louis C.K.ing under the table whenever you see her every time. Like, that's a completely different thing.
I don't know. When you look at the differences between desire and covet, desire is actually more formal or a stronger word for want, while covet is to wish for with eagerness, to desire possession of, often enviously. That's what drives the economy, keeping up with the Joneses. Covetousness
And
is what drives our economy.
I don't like that. I would disagree that that's a good thing. I think it's a bad thing. I think that the betterment of oneself is a better thing. You can see examples and be like, oh, that's cool. I'd like something similar to that. Like, I would like to make something of my own and kind of model it after that. But wanting their thing is different. So it's okay if you see like, oh, neighbor has a cool house. You know, I think I need to make an extension too. I need to add on, because my family would enjoy something like that. And to be like, oh, they have a bigger one, I need to get a bigger one. They have a 2-story house, I need a 3-story house. That's toxic. You're never going to
But
be
that's
happy.
but that's economics, dude. That is modern economics. That is demand economics right there.
That's bad, man. I'm against that. That's when people complain against capitalism. That's what they're talking about. If your neighbor comes up and is like, "Hey, man, you know, we just built on we got this new lawnmower. It works really well, man. You should try it out sometime. You should get one." And you're like, you know what? You're right. I should get one. That's cool. That's economics. That's demand economics right there. That's cool too. That's okay. But the moment that you start wanting to take something from someone else, or it's like a competitive, like toxic thing, that's bad, man. I can't.
I don't know. You look at any HOA governed neighborhood. I'm pretty sure those neighborhoods right there are single-handedly driving our production economy.
Maybe.
I'm pretty sure that if you just looked at the economic impact of HOA governed neighborhoods, if those were to suddenly disappear, or if the mentality that exists within those were to suddenly disappear, you'd see a very appreciable dip in several countries' GDPs.
Well, you know, they say that the whole Boeing thing is going to have a huge effect on GDP.
Yeah.
It's going to have like a 2 or 3% dip. But I look at a neighborhood like that, and I don't think I want their house.
I would never want to live in an HOA controlled neighborhood. Screw that crap. To hell with that.
I've walked around a lot of HOA communities in the past couple of days, and when I look around,
they're well maintained. They're well maintained. I will grant that. But when they write bylaws into their HOA that can legally force you to sell your house for not adhering to some bullshit regulation over a half-inch difference on grass height, that's a problem.
Or they lock down where you can only use certain internet and cable companies,
or you can only make certain improvements to your property.
Let's put it this way. Whenever I walk around and I see a house that I like, I only take a picture if I see a for sale sign in front. And yes, that's like a religious thing. Like, I'm not going to sit there and tell someone else is happy with. I'm not going to want to take their life away from them. I'm only going to look at houses that are on the market because that's fair. I can see like, oh, this is a nice neighborhood. That's really cool. They have a pool. They have this. This house is for sale. Wow. Now I'm gonna flip that switch and be like, is this something I want? Should I get it? I'm gonna start shopping then. But that's how.
But that's you. That's you. Yeah. I mean, our economy runs because of inherent greed.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why capitalism works far better than socialism does. Socialism relies on an inherent idea of altruism that just doesn't exist.
And I guess
I think Colin Quinn, he's a comedian. He probably said it best in his comedic. It was a comedic thing it was a stand-up thing that he did, talking about the history of the world type thing. And he's like, we're the descendants of the pricks. We're not the descendants of the people who stood around waiting their turn.
Yeah.
And the looking in Evo Devo, or evolutionary developmental biology, looking for potential evidence of a quote unquote a selfish gene that would have helped continue the propagation of the species. But anyways, looking further at the rest of this article, so we can kind of go ahead and wind this down. Still knowing the perceived connection between faith and sexual commitment, we suspected that people may see atheists related to believers as less likely to endorse values like monogamy and caring for one's families, values associated with being sexually committed. In such people's minds, sexually uncommitted behavior is linked to several other traits in social behavior, such as opportunism and being impulsive, traits that hardly inspire trust. So we reasoned that people's stereotypes of atheists as being sexually uncommitted were the root cause of distrust to atheists. And they actually went on to prove that through a couple of experiments, most notably this one, the second experiment they conducted, recruiting 445 U.S. participants, and showed them the same profiles, but with one additional piece of information. The person in the profile was also described as keen to either get married or play the field. Adding this scant bit of information about sexual behavior, dating preferences, was enough to override the assumptions people made about atheists. Atheists who wanted to get married were thought to be just as trustworthy as religious people, and they were thought to be even more trustworthy than religious people who wanted to play the field. Statistically, a person's dating preferences explained approximately 19.7% of participants' trustworthiness ratings, a fairly large effect for social sciences. By contrast, the person's religiosity explained less than 1%. Notably, religious participants did not evaluate the religious profile more favorably, suggesting that even religious folks are swayed more by someone's sexual behavior than that person's religiosity. Oh, looks like Harry is sending a very important text message, or he's researching something.
So basically, we got to figure out a way that we can tear down that stereotype if we want to see everyone equally, right?
I guess so. So I guess that means
Are we doing our public service announcement for this week?
Yep. More religious people should play the field. Break that stereotype. More religious people should play the field.
You ever read crack articles?
On occasion.
The person that made the dating profile on the Christian singles, it was throw that ass in a prayer circle.
That's pretty funny. But yeah, more religious people should play the field, apparently. Help break that stereotype up. But it's really funny, though, is that you actually see more evidence of sexual promiscuity coming out of religious communities or communities that identify as religious than you do atheistic communities.
You know what? I think the reason that is, at least partially, is because it's considered news. It's considered
possibly,
and if there's
possibly
any, polyamorous or I guess cheating in an atheist relationship, it would be considered expected. And what a lot of people are overlooking here is how hurtful that would be to the person who was cheated on in an atheist relationship if they are very monogamous and they take that seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Going to be a victim that everyone's basically going to blame and be like, oh, well, you knew what you were getting into and you decided that your relationship was going to be built on God. And like, that's not right to do that.
we do see stuff like that. I mean, I'm willing to bet we could find insert any atheist couple here that may have been broken up due to sexual infidelity, that there was probably at least one hyper-religious family member that chimed in with that comment of, you should have known what you were getting into in that kind of relationship. Even though it shows, even though the actual information shows that over 40% of atheists are in monogamous relationships with young and have young children.
Yeah. My dad told me before I even got in a relationship that it was going to be my fault, and I should have known what I was getting myself into. Because it was going to definitely happen. Love you, Dad.
Wow.
That's not me dishonoring you, by the way, in case you're watching.
Yeah, because what's the punishment for virtually every biblical crime?
That
would be death. That'd be death.
Yeah, wages of sin, death. That's it. And then depending upon your interpretation of hell.
No. I'm not even talking about that. I'm not even talking about the wages of sin being death. I mean, like what was the punishment under Levitican law for virtually every crime?
I think that one was just a good beating. Spare the rod, spoil the child.
No, that was death.
Oh. Okay.
The full text is, thou shalt honor thy mother and thy father. The full text of that verse is, thou shalt honor your mother and thy father so that you may live a long life.
Okay, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be able to kill you.
I don't know. I mean, that definitely lends credence to the old saying of, brought you into this world, I can take you out, and then make another one that looks just like you. That's a biblical family values there.
Yeah, I would love to see where the kid was just kind of like, at your age, they wouldn't.
I mean, when you look at it, the God of the Bible has no problem killing children. No problem at all.
Very little problem. Very little problem.
No problem. Sending bears to maul and kill 42 children because they made fun of a guy.
Okay, but like that wasn't kids. That was like bratty teenagers. Those are the ones that go.
Those are children. Those are still children.
Not in the Bible. You're looking at
those are still children. Or how when they invaded, what was it, Canaan or something? It's like, kill them all.
What's a good album? You saying you got problems with Metallica now?
I don't think Metallica released an album called Kill Them All.
Yeah, they did.
Hold one.
It's a seminal album defining.
Oh, yeah. 83. You're right.
What then? You don't know your thrash, your crossover?
I didn't listen to that far back.
Self-congratulatory stuff on their later albums.
My first exposure to Metallica would have to be the Ride the Lightning album, which came out the year after Kill 'Em All.
Okay.
Yeah, because in all honesty, I'm actually not all that familiar with most of the. Okay, I'm familiar with the track Seek and Destroy, but I think that's mostly because of a re-release on a Greatest Hits album is why I know that track. But the rest of them, actually, I'm not familiar with them. Hit the Lights, Four Horsemen, Motor Breath, Metal Militia. I'm actually not familiar with that album. I'll have to go look into it. But yeah, Ride the Lightning was one of my first forays into Metallica, aside from just about everyone's first foray if you were born after 1985, which would be the Black Album from 1991.
By the way, Metallica, love the fact that a lot of people don't realize that they've quoted preachers in their lyrics before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Metallica is responsible for calling out a fair few hate preachers.
Yeah.
just to their lyrics.
Uh,
Ghost is another one.
Was it like members of Slayer are actually Christian?
I don't know. Carrie King might be.
I think there's 2 of the members of Slayer that are Christian. I know members of Iron Maiden are. There's only like 1 member of Slayer that's like really, I think, anti-religious. But I don't know how
that might actually be Carrie King, the lead singer. I think. I'm not entirely sure. This is gonna hurt my metal cred a great deal. Is I'm not the greatest fan of Slayer.
You know, to each their own. I'm not a huge fan of them either.
I mean, I don't know. I just never really was a big fan of them. So yeah, so the big people that were kind of anti-religion and stuff like that would be Carrie King, Jeff Hanneman, and Tom Araya.
Okay.
Tom Araya was the bassist vocalist. Carrie King is a guitarist, although he does a lot more singing nowadays. And the other guitarist is Jeff Hanneman.
Yeah, but from what I've heard in the interviews, because there was like a preacher that went on the road with them, Tom Araya, it's mostly for show. Like, like he's not actually like super anti-religious in person. It's just he knows that it's
yeah, it's like Phil Anselmo from damn it, Pantera. Yeah, my brain.
Now, that hurt your metal.
That dude, I just spaced right there for a second. Okay, the reason why I spaced is because when I said Phil Anselmo, you want to know the name that popped in my head? Phil Bozeman.
What? Oh, I don't even know who that is.
Yeah, he's the lead singer of another band, and it's like, no. Also, granted, I don't usually talk about Phil Anselmo in conjunction with Pantera. Whenever I talk about Pantera, the first name that always pops in my head is Dimebag Darrell.
Yeah.
It is Daryl Abbott, like hands down. But no, Phil Anselmo, he's an asshole on stage. He's an asshole in a lot of interviews and stuff like that. Off the record and stuff like, and he's generally a pretty nice guy.
So what
he's portraying a character. What's that?
What band do you associate Phil with?
No, I associate him with Pantera. It's just that
you don't think of Pantera when you hear Phil, you think of Pantera when you hear Dimebag.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
And there's several different like artists out there that are parts of different bands also named Phil. Aside from Phil Bozeman, the next thing that popped in my head was Phil Rudd, the drummer for AC/DC. I mean, so the name associated. Dude, I would love to. I would love to do a musical episode where all we do is go through and like rate and just kind of react and rate different songs and stuff like that. I would absolutely love that shit.
It would be hilarious if we did like the
Ghost has to be a part of it. Ghost absolutely must be part of that. And I already know which song I'm bringing up too.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like bands that would be counterpoints. Like you could do like, I don't know, like
Striper
maybe
or Striker, excuse me.
Yeah, you could have Striper. If you're doing...
probably Super Early Flyleaf, Skillet. Those are your religious ones.
Skillet, yeah.
Demon Slayer.
Demon Slayer's a little bit harder.
Oh yeah, no, they're hardcore. They're Christian. They're like hardcore Christian metal.
Is Demon Slayer or Demon Hunter, are they different bands or is it just...
No, they're different bands.
Oh, okay. Because I think I've only heard of Demon Hunter.
They might both be Christian hardcore metal bands, I think. I don't remember.
What if one of them's like... it's like
Say what?
Really Christian. One of them's like not Christian at all. It's like, oh, but...
I mean...
We're not like...
Oh, if we were going to do that, I mean, I would have to bring up something like Dimmu Borgir. Holy crap.
Well, I was going to be like, I could just imagine, like, if you're like, oh, we'll have the Beastie Boys versus DC Talk. The Beastie Boys aren't atheists or even secular, really.
They weren't really anything. Like, okay, Ad Rock, Dave Horowitz, Jewish. MCA or Adam Yauch, he was neo-spiritualist, like Buddhist,
Yeah.
up
So
until the
they
point
were.
where he was, and he remained such in even up to his death from cancer.
Yeah.
I
But
think he had
musically,
lymphatic cancer or something like that.
their music didn't have anything to do with like their personal
No,
value.
it was just all about party culture. Like that's all it was.
And it was actually satirical toward party culture. They were making fun of
Yeah.
it because you've heard of Bikini Kill.
Mm-hmm.
The lead singer was married, either married or dating. I can't remember which member it was, but people would like because Bikini Kill is a feminist punk rock band.
Yeah,
People would give her crap.
I actually think she was dating MCA, if I remember right, because they
That
were
sounds right.
pretty close in age. Ad Rock, I think, either was married or may have gotten married shortly after Beastie Boys like made it.
But she was like, people would make fun of her or like talk trash, like, how can you date a guy like that? His lyrics are so demeaning toward women. And then she would have to explain, like, that's just the lyrics aren't supposed to be taken seriously. Like, that's not his
Yeah, it's like
personality.
it's like the song "Pumped Up Kicks."
Yeah. They're not advocating going around shooting
No,
people.
they're not advocating for school shootings. It's satirizing something, and that's generally how we as human beings become comfortable discussing difficult topics. We have to satirize it first. We have to parodize it before we can allow it to become part of the public consciousness.
My favorite satire of all time is a proposal. Oh, that is so good.
Is what
It is
you
so incredibly
you sketched a little bit.
I'm sorry?
Hey, you sketched a little bit. It like cut out for a second.
A
Your
modest
favorite satirization is what?
a modest proposal. Have you seen the covers where it has the baby on the silver plate with the apple in its mouth, like a roasted pig?
Yep.
Like that is straight up like something out of a Cannibal Corpse album cover.
Yeah.
It's like a 16th, 17th century. It's gotta be 17th century, 17th or 18th.
Mm.
But yeah, Jonathan Swift. That's the cover of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you also look at like the difference between the almost polar differences between some bands that share a lot of the same members, like Stone Sour and Slipknot.
Yeah.
Corey Taylor has openly said Slipknot was to make money.
Yeah.
Slipknot is how he makes money. Stone Sour is where his actual musical inclinations lie. But if you've noticed, is those are starting to bleed into each other a little bit. Like the most recent Stone Sour album, Hydrograd, is actually quite a bit heavier than even House of the Golden Bones.
Man, I don't really think I listen to modern like Christian music that much. Like there was a while where I was like really into it, and there was a lot of really good Christian bands. But then it's like after the emo thing went mainstream, like I didn't see any because Christian bands were doing some cool stuff that no one else was doing back in the day. You know, like, like what? There weren't a lot of mainstream people that were doing some of the cool stuff that Christian bands were doing. Like
what?
Supertones were doing like the ska with a little bit of like rap overlay lyrics. There weren't a lot of mainstream people.
That's Sublime, dude.
No, I'm talking about a little bit heavier than Sublime, a little bit more like ska punk. Like Sublime had one or two songs that were kind of like that, but they weren't doing it really like the gut punch way that OC Supertones were.
I don't know. Psychobilly, which is kind of what OC Supertones would be classified as, especially.
What? Are you kidding
me? A lot of their stuff, like people lump into psychobilly.
No, there's no walking bass line. What are you talking about? It's definitely like, it's all on the upbeats. They're closer to like Less Than Jake.
Hey, bitch at Billboard, not me.
Who?
I said bitch at Billboard, not me.
Billboard called OC Supertones psychobilly?
Yeah, like I remember I remember there was one time where I was like really, really big into psychobilly, and OC Supertones was on that list.
That's
but anyway,
terrible.
We're gonna wrap this up for everybody,
Okay.
and Harry, you and I can continue this conversation once we close the show as kind of a brainstorming session for what stuff we're gonna bring up maybe next week or the week after, and do our musical super show.
All right, we'll have to do that.
All right, everybody. Thank you all again for tuning into another Sunday service with the Atheist Reformation. If you have any questions about any of the articles that were discussed, links are in the video description below, and there are links within those articles that go to a lot of the places that I brought up in talking about the Virginia bill, the Virginia legislation. You just click the hyperlink within the article. It'll take you to the actual bill text from the Virginia legislation. Other than that, remember our public service announcement of the week is more religious people should play the field, relationship-wise. Help break that stereotype up, people. Anyways, thank you all again, and have a good evening.